In 1247 BCE, a woman named Nefertari knelt in a wooden cage on wheels, feeling the desert sand work its way into wounds that would never properly heal. She was 24 years old. 16 days earlier, she had been the wife of Amenhotep, chief scribe at the Temple of Amon in Thebes, a woman who wore linen so fine it was nearly transparent and ate from plates of pharaohs while servants braided gold beads into her hair. Now her head had been shaved, her body covered in a shift so rough it raised welts wherever it touched skin, and she was being dragged across the burning sands of Upper Egypt toward a fate that the magistrate had described with a single word that she hadn't understood at first. Given to the soldiers of the garrison at Buin. She had asked him to clarify, to explain what given meant in practical terms, what status she would retain, what rights would remain hers. The magistrate had looked at her with something that might have been pity or contempt or nothing at all. "You will have no status," he said. "You will retain no rights. You will be communal property of the garrison, and every soldier from the commander to the lowest conscript will have equal claim to your person. You will serve until you are released or until you die, whichever comes first." Her husband's crime had been fabricated. She knew this, everyone knew this, but Amenhotep's rival had powerful friends, and powerful friends meant that evidence didn't need to be real to be effective. He was sentenced to the copper mines where men rarely survived more than 2 years. She was sentenced to something else, something the legal codes described in language so clinical that its true meaning was deliberately obscured. This was not random cruelty. She was beginning to understand during those 11 days of travel. This was system. This was a punishment that ancient Egypt had refined over centuries, a method of destroying a woman without the mess of execution, a way of making someone disappear from respectable society while technically remaining alive. What you're about to learn has been systematically excluded from the popular narratives that celebrate ancient Egypt as a civilization of pyramids and golden treasures. The scholars who marvel at Egyptian architecture have chosen not to examine too closely what that civilization did to those who fell outside its protections. Tonight, you will learn about the punishment the Egyptians called giving to the soldiers, not execution, which would have been quick, not slavery, which at least provided clear legal status, but something worse than either, a dissolution of personhood so complete that the women who endured it ceased to exist in any meaningful sense while their bodies continued to function. You will learn why this punishment was reserved for specific crimes, particularly those that embarrassed powerful men or threatened religious institutions. You will learn about the frontier garrisons where these women were sent, isolated outposts where 300 soldiers lived for years without leave, without families, without any acceptable outlet for desires that Egyptian culture normally channeled through marriage. And you will learn what happened in those garrisons, not in graphic detail but in the systematic reality that the sources preserve, because Nefertari is 3 days away from Buin, 3 days away from discovering what given actually means, and the truth is darker than anything you've imagined about ancient Egypt. After 14 days of travel, Nefertari arrived at the fortress of Buin, where stone walls rose 40 feet from the sand, watchtowers scanning the horizon for Nubian armies that had tested Egyptian power for generations. An escort handed her over to a garrison officer who examined documents and gestured for her to be taken to a building near the western wall. And as she was led through the fortress streets, every soldier fell silent because they knew exactly what she was. They had seen women like her before. Inside the building she found Hannah Mahit, a woman perhaps 35 years old with weathered skin and eyes that were flat and empty. The eyes of someone who had retreated to a place where nothing could reach her anymore. "I have been here for 6 years," Hannah Mahit said without emotion. "I will explain how things work." Nefertari asked the question whose answer she already feared. "How many of us are there?" "3 now that you've arrived." "There were 4 until last month, but Sayatu died, officially from fever, though the commander knew better. 3 women for 300 soldiers, and the mathematics of what this implied was staggering. Most of us don't survive," Hannah Mahit continued. "The average is 2 years. How to maintain your health when everything here is designed to destroy it. How to remain yourself inside when everything outside is trying to erase you. If you want to understand the darkness beneath Egypt's golden surface, if you want to know the stories that mainstream documentaries won't tell you, subscribe to this channel, because there are truths about ancient civilizations that deserve to be remembered, not for shock value but because forgetting them dishonors everyone who suffered through them. That night the garrison commander Kamwaset summoned Nefertari to his quarters, and what she found surprised her because he was not what she expected. But he leaned forward and his exhaustion was visible in every line of his face. "I've commanded this garrison for 12 years, he told her. "I've watched 11 women arrive in your position. 3 survived to be released, 8 died. But I can at least acknowledge that you're a person being fed into a machine rather than pretending the machine is righteous. Nefertari asked about the survivors, where they went, what became of them, but Chemwaset could only shake his head. Your sentence has no term, Chemwaset finally said, the words hanging in the air between them like a death sentence that would take years to complete. You are given to this garrison until you are released or until you die, and release requires a petition to authorities in Thebes, which requires someone with influence to care whether you live or perish. And the silence that followed told Nefertari everything she needed to know about how likely that was. The punishment of being given to soldiers was worse than execution because execution ended. Worse than slavery because slaves had owners who bore responsibility for them. Worse than any other fate ancient Egypt could devise because it created a legal category of non-personhood that allowed respectable Egyptians to pretend. It was unhappening even as it destroyed women whose only crimes were being married to the wrong men or knowing the wrong secrets. The Egyptian legal codes mentioned this punishment so rarely and in language so vague that modern scholars have debated for decades what it actually meant. But that vagueness was deliberate because speaking about it directly would require acknowledging realities that threatened the cosmic principle of Mat, the order and justice that Egypt claimed to embody. So they used euphemisms. They said given instead of describing what would actually happen. They maintained the fiction that this was justice rather than organized brutality. And women like Nefertari disappeared into fortress garrisons on the edges of empire where they served purposes the legal codes described only in clinical abstractions until they died or until political circumstances made their continued existence inconvenient enough that someone with power decided to end their sentences.